Good evening, and welcome to Mike Jesus Langer Presents. Tonight, a tale of anxiety, horses, and Prague's tourism industry. I Am Cursed, and it's horse-related, was originally released in weekly installments August of 2021, with the audience deciding what steps the main character takes to escape his horrid fate. The story is concluded, for better or for worse, and there is nothing that you can do to change its outcome. But if you would like to help a small YouTube channel sail through these rough algorithm seas, please like the video and comment horse to give it strength. I would also like to note that a couple months after the series had originally finished its run, the practice of horse-drawn carriages in the historical center of Prague became illegal. I played no part in this decision, but I'm willing to accept all credit. If you would like to thank me in the horse's stead and support an independent Bohemian production in the process, drop by patreon.com/MikeJLanger. And finally, if you would like our digital paths to cross again, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon. Brand new stories are posted every Friday, with compilations of older series being posted every Tuesday. With that said, I wish you a pleasant listening experience. Hope everyone is safe, sane, and healthy out there. We both hunger for knowledge. We both hunger for a solution. He's just as confused as I am, perhaps even more. God knows he probably understands even less of the situation than I do. Behind those dumb animal eyes, I see a yearning to be anywhere else but here. This horse should be somewhere out in a meadow or sleeping in a stable. He shouldn't be on the 7th floor of an apartment complex. He doesn't deserve this fate. My temper might be bad, and I do rush to speaking without proper thought, but I don't think I deserve this fate either. I've repented for my sins, yet each and every night, the horse still wakes me from my dreamless sleep. He's looking down on me right now as I write this impotent Reddit post. I can feel the heat of his snout on the back of my neck. I'm a proud man, and it pains me to ask for help, but this strange corner of the internet is my last bastion of hope. I need help. A man and a horse were never meant to be trapped in a bedroom this small. My landlord knows nothing of my curse, but the amount of damage, the smell, it surely will alert him soon. For the past 3 days, I have prayed for a night without the horse. I have put all of my hope in the animal simply not showing up one day, but my faith was misplaced. Every night, around midnight, the horse appears in my cramped bedroom. Tonight the beast has split my phone charger in half with its hoof, so I fear this is my last chance to speak to an audience that might understand, that might not call me mad. If you know how to make these nightly visits stop, if you have even a shred of advice on what I am to do, please help me. The evening before this terrible curse fell upon me was a beautiful one. But then again, most evenings in Prague are. Having spent most of the past 2 years in the Soviet-era housing projects that circle the city, I decided to treat myself to a lamplit stroll through the historical part of town. Walking past the dark Gothic structures, seeing the results of nigh 1,000 years of civilization, it all brought a sense of calm into my soul. What further pleased me were the obnoxiously colored signs advertising tourist traps. For years I've hated how the specter of revenue has twisted our culture to normalize massage parlors next to cathedrals and stomach-churning pub crawls in quiet residential areas. Yet the return of the tacky advertisements signaled something more than an utter lack of taste. They signaled the return of the tourist industry. Prior to the plague, I worked as a tour guide. The past year has not been easy, but all of the pain has been muffled beneath a promise that things would one day return to normal. The man covered in silver paint pretending to be a mute Michael Jackson in front of the 15th century astronomical clock was a sign of that promise being fulfilled. As I walked through the streets, I loosened my face mask and let my mind be taken by the impending promise of normalcy. I dreamed of coming back to work, of the rapture of the crowd, of the well-earned money, of the stolen nights with women from places I would never visit. Yet then, with no warning, all of those dreams were whisked away. I saw the horse. It stood in the old town square, right next to a towering statue of a priest who was burned alive for criticizing the Catholic Church. The horse was harnessed to a carriage covered in fake gold and fake velvet. No amount of tacky decoration could hide the animal's pain. It was dripping spit all over the cobbled streets, breathing breaths that seemed terminal. All memories of the pleasant aspects of the tourism industry fled my mind and were replaced by the specter of the summer heat. The burning sun, the seared tan lines of name badges, the eternal search for shade that would never be satisfied. Reflected in that poor animal's eyes, I saw the worst of the tourism industry. Yet I willingly subjected myself to the exhaustion that the brutal summer months bring. I walked the streets with my name badge branding my red skin. I had a choice. The horse did not. I stood there, overcome with sorrow from the sentience reflected from those poor eyes. I stood there like Nietzsche with the view of a cruel world at my feet and discomforting empathy burning in my throat. An American family with a screaming child approached the horse. I recognized the looks in their faces. "Don't sign up for the horse carriage ride!" I yelled, in English. The family froze. Even the child found me more interesting than whatever it was crying about. Yet, the look in their eyes wasn't welcoming. To them, I was just a random person screaming on the street. "Sorry," I said, reaching into my jacket for my name badge. "I used to be a tour guide. We're very passionate about these things. Horse carriage rides around the old town are not authentic at all, and most locals see them as tourist traps. If you have a map, I can point out an authentic restaurant for you." The name badge always does the trick, and the word authentic always clinches it. As soon as I pointed out a nearby restaurant, the child remembered its misfortune and started to weep again. The American couple thanked me and set off on a search for good authentic goulash. From behind his blinders, the horse looked at me. His exhausted eyes didn't carry a hint of comprehension, yet somehow it seemed as if the beast understood I had saved it from excess labor. He let out a long sigh. The shivering in his muscles died down. The astronomical clock beat its ancient bell and trotted out its 500-year-old puppet show. The universe seemed at peace. I felt good about myself. That didn't last.
"The fuck was that?"
Came a shout in the local tongue. He emerged from behind his carriage, furious. His skin was rough. The years had made themselves known on his face. He had lived through Brezhnev, possibly even a couple years of Khrushchev. Had I met the man in regular clothes, in a smoky pub, I would have ran. My tender bones, born into tender democracy, are no match for someone who went through the struggle. Yet that evening, I did not run. The angry carriage driver's clothes looked like they were the result of a torrid affair between a modern-day magician and a member of the Austro-Hungarian royalty. The top hat, covered in sequins, made the man significantly less intimidating. It emboldened me, even. "You shouldn't do that to horses," I said, with more confidence than I usually had arguing with strangers. "What you're doing to this horse should not be legal."
"The fuck else am I meant to do with a horse? It's an animal. It was born to work. I feed it, it drags around the tourists, and then I get to feed my family. The horse is fucking lucky that it's not salami, but here come you with your sunflower morals." The man came within striking distance. Suddenly, his magical clothes weren't so calming.
"Can't you see the animal's in pain?"
I asked, tapping the horse's tense shoulder. The beast let out the gentlest of neighs in response to my touch.
"Get your fucking hands off my animal."
I could smell the brand of cigarettes on his breath. Startki, the cancer sticks of a country that no longer exists.
"But can't you see? The animal is in pain."
"So what? Life is pain. Every morning I wake up with a headache and a sore back. Who the fuck is looking out for me? No one. But that's fucking life. This is my goddamn livelihood and you're fucking with it. Get the fuck out of here before I fucking deck you."
The carriage driver didn't wait for a response. He simply gave me a light shove, landed my tailbone on the cobblestone, and stomped off. Once he reached his carriage, he produced a pack of cigarettes from beneath his hat and lit up.
Fucking liberals.
He grumbled to himself. I sat there on the cobblestone laid 100 years prior, watching the perfect midpoint between the men that promote strip clubs and the men that promote concert halls angrily smoke. The astronomical clock finished off its show, and a handful of disappointed travelers started to make their way back home to their hotels. I should have gone home too, but I couldn't. Those tired eyes, that dripping spit, the majestic animal that hovered over me wouldn't let me rest. I couldn't walk away without getting at least one last jab in. Without knowing what I was about to say, I decided to let the carriage driver know how I felt about him.
Well, I think you're a bad person.
I said, getting up.
If I had a horse, I would treat him much nicer.
Since that evening, I have spent a lot of time thinking about that phrase. I don't know why I said it. I don't know why I felt the need to bring up the hypothetical of me owning a horse. Perhaps it was the lack of social contact throughout the plague. Perhaps I simply wanted to reassert to myself that I was a kinder human being than the carriage driver. Yet regardless of my motivations, I said it. If I had a horse, I would treat him much nicer. Those words have clawed their way across my spirit each and every night since then. It is with those words, I fear, that I have sealed my fate. I reached out into the universe and offered a hypothetical. I was a fool to think that the cosmos would not answer.
Be careful what you wish for,
he said, puffing on a cigarette. The reddened sky of the setting sun had faded away, and a starless night had painted itself above us. Beneath the lamplight, the carriage driver no longer looked absurd. He stood on cobbled streets, once soaked in blood, dressed like something out of a toddler's nightmare, yet he no longer looked absurd, with the ancient stone of the mother of all cities around him. He looked right at home.
The fuck you looking at?
He said. Nothing, I replied. Not wanting to get shoved again, I made my way back home. I still remember sitting on the subway, listening to the low rumble of the metro, thinking my conflict with the carriage driver was the low point of my week. The oddly dressed man and his anger soaked up all of my attention. For a moment, I even forgot about the suffering horse. Soon enough, however, I would be reminded of the animal. I would be reminded of the animal in the most terrible of ways. I woke up in the middle of the night, confused and scared. With my blinds pulled down, the room was in complete darkness. Yet even past my inability to see, I knew there was something else in the room with me. At first, I ignored the sensation of being watched. I convinced myself that I was simply having a bad dream, that perhaps the kebab I had bought on my way back home had disagreed with my digestive system. Yet the foreign presence was difficult to ignore. The stuffy air of my bedroom was laced with the scents of the countryside. In the dark, I could hear something breathing in low, heavy sighs. The thought that I was not alone was starting to manifest into a certainty. Something big was attempting to stand still by the foot of my bed, but failing desperately. I was too groggy to wrestle with my fear of the unknown. I simply flipped on my bedside lamp. The eyes, the muzzle, the confusion. The afterimage of the horror stayed with me as the room descended back into darkness. I was almost certain that it was the animal's long snout that tipped over the lamp. I was almost certain that there was a live horse standing in my cramped bedroom. But I refused to accept the idea. The flashlight on my phone was meant to ease my mind. Yet, when I reached for my jeans lying by my bed, I found another reason to be worried. Instead of grasping at cloth, my fingers rubbed up against the rough surface. I knew that what I touched was a hoof. I knew there was a horse in my bedroom.
I was certain, in my heart of hearts, that the animal which I had argued over on the Old Town Square was currently standing on my jeans. But I retrieved the phone regardless. Knowing full well what the light would reveal, I turned on the torch application. Spit flew from its jowls as the animal screamed in confusion. Something cracked beneath its hooves. The fact that the horse was in the room with me was an unavoidable part of reality. The maddening questions of how the beast had made its way to the 7th floor were threatening to consume me. I found one last bit of refuge. I convinced myself it was all a dream. I could smell the horse. I could hear the soft crunching of electronics beneath its hooves. The horse was clearly standing right by my bed. Yet I somehow managed to convince myself it was all a dream. With a deafeningly loud podcast about the Holy Roman Empire in my ears, and the room draped in complete darkness, I could not hear or see the horse. I could only feel its hot breath and the occasional drips of perspiration from its muzzle. The horse smelled my body up and down, possibly in search of answers for its predicament, possibly in search of hay. Either way, the horse was not pleased. Occasionally, I could still feel the floor shift as the massive animal stepped side to side. I did my best to focus my attention on the Holy Roman Empire podcast. I desperately hung on to the bits of information flowing through my ears, trying to ignore the unavoidable truth stomping around my bedroom. At first, ignoring the horse seemed nigh impossible. Yet as I forced myself to focus on the prolonged torrent of information about the Habsburg family, I did the same thing everyone does when they listen to people talk about the Holy Roman Empire for an extended period of time. I fell asleep. I opened my eyes to slivers of sunlight crisscrossing my bedroom. I was alone. For a moment I was overjoyed at the idea that the horse had simply been a product of a fever dream. But then my nose caught the smell of something foul. I got up and looked at the floor. The scream I let out was loud enough for the neighbor to bang his broom against the ceiling. Before me was excrement and destruction. My floor was damaged beyond the wildest of security deposits. My laptop, my dear companion for the year of quarantine, lay crushed by my bed. A deep hoofmark cracked the machine well past the return policy. The horse was real. There was no escaping it. The horse was real and it wasn't in my room anymore. Immediately, I unplugged my table lamp and seized it as a weapon. The thought of the barnyard animal hiding somewhere in the apartment caused my blood to grow cold and jagged. Each room held the potential for the animal to be doing further damage to the home I was renting. Each door I opened rushed images of getting trampled to death into my mind. Yet no horse presented itself. The damage and the excrement were only contained to my cramped bedroom. The rest of the apartment was spotless, or as spotless as the apartment of someone who's been unemployed for a prolonged time can be. Either way, there were no signs of a horse entering, exiting, or even standing anywhere outside of my bedroom. I threw the glass shards of my lamp into the trash and scooped up the excrement into an old McDonald's takeout bag. Not wanting to risk bumping into my neighbors in the elevator, I elected to keep the putrid fast food container on the balcony. Removing the excrement from my floor made the stench less potent, but regardless of how much of a breeze I forced through the room, it still stank of manure. After the first night, I did not speak a word of the horse to anyone. The perplexing reality of the animal still swelled my heart with terror and anxiety. Putting my curse into words was beyond my reach. I simply laid in bed and listened to the sounds of children playing among the cement walls of the housing project. Oh, how I longed to be young and carefree once again. Oh, how I longed to be liberated from the festering dread that comes with the unexplainable. Oh, how I longed to live a simple existence once more. Yet, no existence can be simple when a horse manifests by your bed in the middle of the night. The sun had set. I had spent the majority of the day drifting in and out of consciousness, trying to catch up on the sleep that I had missed the night before.
It was during one of those gentle waltzes between nervous wakefulness and dreamless sleep that the horse appeared once more. My window was open. The dim lights of the street lamps illuminated enough of the animal for it to be unmistakable. The horse screamed, confused and uncomfortable. The sound of broken strings and cracked wood cut through my bedroom. My guitar. My one way of channeling the anxious year of quarantine into art. It lay broken at the horse's hooves. The animal bounced its heavy body against the floorboards in frustration. The whole room shifted. From beneath the floor, an angry broom responded to the animal's stomps.
Horse, stop it!
I whispered to the animal, letting my fear of homelessness overpower my fear of the foreign beast.
Shh, please. No one can know you're here. Horse, please.
The animal calmed, as if it understood my words, as if it wanted to work together to get out of this horrid curse we were both stuck in. Yet no progress was made. I spent the night staring at the horse, trying to find some semblance of reason within its eyes, but my search was fruitless. We faced off well into the first rays of sun, man and beast, both searching for answers to their respective predicaments. My willingness to stare off with the horse soon came to a close, however. As we searched each other's eyes for a way out, the horse defecated again. My soul-churning confusion and fear soon turned to disgust. I made my way to the McDonald's takeout bags to once again lessen the presence of manure in my bedroom. By the time I came back, as if the horse had rode off on the rays of the rising sun, the animal was gone. I did not waste time on self-pity this time. Immediately, I messaged every person in my contacts who I thought could help me. I did so with the utmost hope that someone would provide advice, that someone would tell me I have not gone mad. Yet no such thing happened. Most of my friends are tour guides, or perhaps more accurately, were tour guides. With the badge not holding us together, we have all drifted apart into unanswered message sent territory. All my other points of contact either avoided my message entirely or wrote back to me with jokes. I knew the horse would return at midnight. Without a shred of doubt, I was certain that the mysterious animal would appear in my bedroom again, but I did nothing to brace for its arrival. I simply laid in bed, motionless, waiting for the inevitable barnyard intrusion on my rented home. The sun set and the children outside stopped playing. I knew I should prepare, that I should at least ensure that nothing on my floor can be destroyed by the animal's hooves, but the absurdity of my situation left me paralyzed. The snapping of electronics rung in the arrival of midnight. My phone charger didn't stand a chance against the beast's hooves. As I write these words, the horse is looking at me. In the dying light of my phone screen, I can see his bulging eyes look at me for guidance. I have none. I am just as confused as he is. Neither of us want to be in this situation. We need help. So please, strangers of the internet, I beg you, tell me what to do about the horse in my bedroom. The air here smells of beer and fried cheese. There's a particularly rowdy group of Germans sitting right behind me. My mind is fragmented between worry and exhaustion, but at least there's a spare phone charger. I'm swaying between a food coma and gentle drunkenness, but beyond the pleasure of a good meal and a good beer, there's a single sobering thought. The horse has now disappeared from my bedroom. Both the animal and me are still in the grasp of a curse we cannot comprehend. That's why I have returned to this faceless corner of the internet, to ask for your advice once more. But first, let me tell you of my past 2 days. Thanks to the advice of you kind strangers, I have learned more about the curse. Some of this knowledge, however, came at a steep price. After 3 days of confusion and horror, I only knew this. The horse would appear in my bedroom every night around midnight. The timing was never completely precise, yet the horse's position always was. It always stood in the middle of my cramped bedroom, by the foot of my bed. There was no way I was going to lead a fully grown barnyard animal out of my 7th floor apartment. I couldn't imagine the beast getting out of my doorframe, let alone fitting in the elevator. What did seem within the realm of possibility, however, was dealing with the horse out in the concrete coliseum of Prague 13. If I could somehow get the horse to appear down by the benches outside of my apartment complex, my problems would be solved. A horse on the ground floor is considerably easier to deal with than a horse 30 meters in the sky. If I could get the horse to manifest outside on the benches, I could make him disappear out of my life with a single magic phone call.
Hello? Police? Yeah, there's a horse standing in the middle of the housing projects. He looks very confused. Could you send someone to pick him up?
The summer air outside was crisp, a nice change from the stifling heat of the day. I had hoped to be alone, yet when I walked outside, I found the benches occupied. The teens sat high up, electing to stay on top of the backrests rather than sitting in the bench like a normal person. All 4 of them were drinking from the same Pepsi bottle that they slowly topped off with Tuzemak rum. The scent of skunk weed levitated around them like an invisible force field. As soon as I sat down, their loud conversation died down into mumbling. The amped-up techno playing from their speakers turned down to a whisper. They didn't like the look of me. I was far too occupied with thoughts of the horse to develop an opinion of them. After a couple of minutes of concerned glances and whispered comments about the old guy sitting next to them, the teens got up and traveled to another group of benches. Soon they stumbled out of my sight, but their slurring speech was ever present in the housing projects. When the Bolsheviks drew cement circles around Prague's borders, they did so for maximum housing capacity. They never considered the echo chambers they were creating. A helicopter passed above. It disappeared almost instantly, but its low sonic heartbeat continued to echo through the projects. As the world around us shook, the teens indulged in a loud chugging competition. I tried to ignore the cacophony and kept my eyes on my apartment's open window. With every ounce of my being, I tried to stay optimistic about the horse's arrival. I tried to fill my mind with positive thoughts, with hope. But then, one of the teens started to vomit. The heave was followed by a crowd of high-pitched laughter, but the sound was wretched enough to wipe out all joy from the universe. In an instant, I knew that there was no escaping the horse. In one pained, throaty bark, I knew that my future was doomed. The horse was a punishment. The horse couldn't be disposed of so easily. As I sat there in that storm of sound, I kept on looking at my window, searching for a shred of calm. I found the exact opposite. In the blink of an eye, my worst fears were realized. I saw the horse's muzzle peeking out of my bedroom. The creature sniffed the air. The horse did not like that sound. The retching went quiet. The housing projects grew still.
Holy shit, was that a horse?
By the time the horse screamed again, I was already in the elevator, slamming the button for the 7th floor. The animal nearly kicked me when I entered my bedroom. The horse was more agitated than it had ever been before. I reached for its mane, hoping that my touch would pacify the creature, but the horse didn't calm. Instead, the animal bared its teeth at me. Big and dull and strong. I didn't want to risk having my fingers crushed. I was concerned for my safety, yet the horse was still stomping and neighing with enough fervor to wake someone from a clinical coma. The bangs of my neighbor's broom from the floor below were imminent. Fearing eviction, I ran out of my bedroom in search of something to calm the horse. All I found was an apple. It had been rotting in my fridge far too long to be edible, but it was suitable for a barnyard animal. The apple in my hand was quickly replaced with a layer of spit. When the horse's long jaw finished chewing on the questionable fruit, the animal started to breathe easier. The horse calmed, as did I. The beast was loud, but my neighbors did nothing to complain. No new structural damage had been incurred, and I was without injury. For a moment, it felt like a crisis had been averted. That moment didn't last long. My buzzer caused the horse to grow nervous once more. The moment I opened the door, I was met with a barrage of insults. My neighbor, Miss Novakova, stood in front of me in a terrifying nightdress and glared at me with even more terrifying eyes. She screamed at me for disturbing the night peace and being a lousy neighbor and 1,000 other things that made me a terrible human being. As she spoke, her shrill voice bounced around the stairwell, waking up everyone who wasn't awake yet. Her whole triad against me ended in a single announcement. She was going to complain about me to the building manager. Past my racing heartbeat, I couldn't hear the horse, but I knew the calm wouldn't last. The animal needed me. The animal needed me, and I needed to talk myself out of this situation. I spoke without thinking. For the first couple of seconds, it felt like I was floating out of my body, watching a pitiful silent film. I was going through full dissociation, until I saw myself mouth the words, "tour guide." Miss Novakova's face softened. I told her things haven't been easy. I told her how difficult it was to lose all sense of financial stability without any real hope in sight. I reminded her that people's livelihoods died during the plague. Never mentioned anything about the horse, but by the time my sob story was finished, she wasn't concerned about the strange noises coming from my apartment. The anger had faded from her eyes. She no longer spoke for the audience of other neighbors. She whispered. She told me it was my last warning. Next time I woke her up, she would lodge a formal complaint. She also told me she hopes the borders won't close again. Then she left. When I came back to my bedroom, one of the teens outside started to vomit again, but aside from the wrenching echoes, the night was calm. I found a stack of carrots in the fridge and fed them to the horse for staying quiet. There wasn't much else that I could do for the animal at that point. I closed my eyes and tried to get some rest before the morning. The horse's presence was still disturbing, but after 3 nights of the same terror, I found sleep tugging at me fairly quickly. As I drifted out of consciousness, I thought about the nausea that accompanied most of my summer shifts. I'd occasionally have the conversation with other old-timers in the industry. It was a form of informed stage fright, we agreed. After running the same 3-hour show a couple hundred times, you'd learn how to perfect your timing and trim the historical fat off the stories that made people's eyes glaze over. With daily crowds came daily practice, but with daily crowds also came something else. The bad tours. The tours were all tip-based. We paid the company per head they brought to our tour and then pocketed whatever tips were left over. There was good money to be made among the crowds. Most people who decide to backpack across Europe tend to be kind and generous. People in general tend to be kind. Bumping into someone unhinged is rare. Human lightning strikes are rare as well, but they do happen. On a long enough time scale, within the crowds of delightful people, we would all spot someone horrible. Someone who made the 3-hour tour feel like a decade. Vocal Soviet apologists, Holocaust deniers, folks that decided to drop acid on the tour and then make a scene. All it took was one malicious person. It didn't matter how well we handled it. Uncomfortable people don't tip well. I would get nauseous right before the tour. I knew the chances of me catching a bad crowd were minimal, but that potential, the thought that one of the strangers in the audience might be poised to harm me, it tugged at the pit of my stomach. Other old-timers would have tunnel vision, or panic attacks, or hand tremors. Some could turn it off, some couldn't. Some powered through it, some retired. Tour guiding was the only thing I knew how to do. I knew I couldn't retire. I knew I had to come back to work sooner than later. The memories of dry heaving in the world's largest castle complex were discomforting, but with the horse standing next to me, they lacked their bite. I wondered if I would ever be able to get physically sick over something as petty as money or crowds. When I woke, the horse was gone once more. Just like the morning prior, I cleaned what was left behind with the McDonald's takeout bags. When the hallway outside of my apartment seemed quiet, I quickly snuck out with all 3 manure-filled sacks and left them by the trash containers. Then, I headed out to the old town square. If I was to find a way to deal with the horse situation, the vulgar carriage driver seemed like a good place to start. For most of the morning, I moved through life with a sense of exhausted detachment, but a subway ride shook the mental fog out of me. My internal monologue picked up from a sleepy crawl to the speed of a roaring train. By the time I climbed out in the historical district of town, I had composed a full apology for the angry carriage driver. I hoped that the strange-dressed man would take pity on me, much like Miss Novakova did. I hoped that I could reason with him and find a way to get rid of the horse that plagued my home and my life. When I arrived at the astronomical clock, however, the carriage driver was nowhere to be found. Instead of a sequence-covered cart, there were 2 other horse-drawn carriages. The carts were almost as obnoxious as the one I had encountered 3 days prior, but their drivers were considerably underdressed in comparison to the angry top-hat-wearing man. They stood right by their animals, one puffing on a cigarette and the other indulging in the most traditional of Czech foods: sausage, bread, and mustard served on a paper plate. The smoker wore a mix of muted formal attire, giving him the look of a village mayor who got lost in the capital. The driver, having his lunch, abandoned fancy decorum altogether and settled for shorts and a grease-covered t-shirt. On his head, he wore a dusty red baseball cap of the non-existent Prague University. Not wanting to risk another argument or another horse appearing in my bedroom, I avoided talking to the men at first. Instead, I walked through the usual routes that the horse carriages took. The once crowded outdoor seating area of Loha Street was completely empty, save for a group of mothers with strollers. Aside from a group of young giggling Hasidic Jews, the boulevard of Pear Street was abandoned as well. The tourist trade had not picked up enough to justify 3 carriage drivers in the city yet. "Have you guys seen a man with a top hat?" I finally asked, circling back to the 2 carriage drivers. "He was here about 3 days ago. Think he might be your colleague." "In a polite society," proclaimed the smoker, lighting a fresh cigarette with embers of his last, "we say Dobrý den before we ask strangers questions." "Dobrý den," I said, feeling the gentlest pang of guilt from forgetting my manners. The man blew out a cloud of smoke and nodded. I was free to ask my questions. "Have you gentlemen seen—" "Ah!" The graduate of a university that didn't exist shouted, nearly choking on the remnants of his sausage. "Are you the guy who stole Yaroslav's horse?" "What? No! I did not steal anyone's horse. I'm just looking for—" "Stop shouting," the smoker said. "We're not in a zoo." "I didn't steal anyone's horse," I half whispered. "I'm just looking for the driver with the top hat. Have you seen him?" "Yaroslav, yeah," said the man with the baseball hat, disposing of his paper plate. "Came here 2 days back, furious. Apparently got into an argument with, and I quote, some fucking snowflake sunflower man-child about his horse. Next day, he shows up to the stable and his horse is gone. He's pretty sure the man-child stole his horse. If I was this man-child, I would hide." "Why?" I asked. The smoker laughed. "Yaroslav is an angry man," he said, puffing on a cigarette. "He is an angry, angry man. Hated that horse. Hated this job. Hated just about everything. But he's an angry, angry man. And he's looking for someone to punish for the horse's disappearance." "Saw him stomp a pigeon to death once," added the man with the cap. "Oh God, why?" Neither of them had any answers. They just shrugged. "If you stole the horse," said the man with the cigarette, "I'd return it." "I didn't steal the horse," I said. But neither of the carriage drivers were paying attention to me by then. A man with the looks of a KGB-era Putin showed up and started barking questions at them in Russian. A couple steps behind the Russian was a stunningly beautiful woman with nails longer than her fingers. She seemed completely uninterested in her partner's interaction. In fact, she gave off the impression that she was above the petty squabbles of the mortal realm in general. The driver with the red hat and I stayed silent. We did not understand the interaction. The better-dressed carriage driver spoke back to the stern man in confident Russian. Soon enough, the couple was climbing into the back of the cart. I knew better than to raise questions about the horse's well-being. "Do you know where Yaroslav is now?" I asked the man with the cap as the carriage with the Russians drove off. He watched the long-nailed woman ride off as if she was his only chance at love. Then he sighed. "I don't know, man. Where do horse carriage drivers go if someone steals their horse?" I sighed too. Going to the old town square didn't get me any closer to figuring out how to get rid of the horse. Knowing that there's a violent carriage driver out there who means me harm made my situation that much worse. Prague is definitely not known for being a fragrant city, but the occasional whiff of a piss corner was much better than the constant barrage of manure in my apartment. I roamed the cobblestone streets with hopes of clearing my mind, of remembering how small my problems are in the face of history, yet my worries about the future made it impossible to focus on the past. Suddenly, none of the architecture around me seemed familiar. Suddenly, those 2 years of not thinking about history felt like an eternity. I wasn't a tour guide anymore. I was a foreigner in my own city. "Mark?" A familiar voice broke me out of my panic. "Hey there, stranger. Long time no see." Ignoring all World Health Organization recommendations, Adela hugged me. At first I didn't mind. The sight of an old co-worker was a breath of fresh air into my stifling day. Yet when I realized the smell of my bedroom might have clung onto my clothes, I broke our embrace. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, but in her hand she had an umbrella. Her t-shirt was a size too small and looked like it came straight from a screen printing store in the mall. "Who are you working for these days?" I asked. "That's a complicated story, and I'm pretty thirsty," she said, putting away her name badge. "You down for a beer, or are you off to somewhere?" Somewhere. On the edge of the town, a cramped apartment with hoof marks was waiting for me. I figured a beer would make that meeting easier. We sat down in one of the pubs that we used to take the beer tours through, a place authentic enough to have unhinged art on the walls and cheap pilsner, but not authentic enough for the locals to smoke inside after the sun goes down. All the waitresses smiled and chatted with Adela. I had worked in the company 2 years longer than her, but no one seemed to recognize me. "Have you been here since the lockdowns?" "Oh yeah," she said, waving at one of the Spanish company tour guides. "Always good to stay in touch in this business, isn't it?" "Yeah." It wasn't until we were asked for our order that I realized the last thing I ate was one of the carrots I fed to the horse. I ordered a fried cheese for my late lunch and an unfiltered staropramen to tide me over until the food arrived. A joke about beer basically being liquid bread flashed across my mind. I had repeated it to 1,000 strangers on 100 beer tours before. Not all of the tour guiding shtick was gone. Even though the plague was starting to die down, I had avoided looking into the dynamics of the tourism industry. I knew my savings were running dangerously low and that tour guiding was just about the only sustainable source of income for me. Yet I kept on putting off research until the last moment. I put off research because I was scared all I would hear was bad news. Adela immediately justified my fears. The horse carriage drivers were back. The Spanish tour guides were back. Even the pub crawls were slowly starting up. But the English circuit was barely breathing. A couple of the big companies went bankrupt. Others were operating on skeleton crews. But most were just waiting to open up until next summer. There was no way the repairs my apartment needed could wait another year. "So, where do you work?" I asked as the fried cheese arrived. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." She waved for 2 more beers. "The company I'm at has an opening. You looking to work again?" "Definitely," I said, way too eagerly. To not seem desperate, I quickly cut into the cheese and started chewing. Immediately, I burnt my tongue. With the English circuit dead, one of the Spanish companies saw an opening to expand. Adela was the first on board. The groups and money were unpredictable, but the flow of people was big enough to justify a second hire. "So?" she said, taking one of my French fries. "Want to work together again?" I gave her my answer so fast, I nearly choked on my food. "Great," she said. "Are you free on Sunday?" "This Sunday?" "Yeah. I'm going out of town for the day and we already have some reservations." My stomach did a flip. "That's 3 days. I'm not sure if I remember enough to do a tour." "Oh, well, come right back. I'd offer to run through the basics, but I'm a walking corpse right now. We can grab a glass of something tomorrow and chat it over if you want." It didn't take her long to notice my nerves. With a grin, she took another French fry from my plate and grabbed her backpack off her chair. "Enjoy your meal. Think it over and, I'm just gonna pop over to the bathroom." She took her backpack with her. The model of the free walking tours is completely tips-based. People show up to the show for free, listen to 3 hours, and then decide what they think our time is worth. Then, the tour guides pay the company a commission and keep the rest of the tips. The question of whether there is a rest to keep or whether the tour is a bust is universally answered in a restaurant bathroom surrounding major tour paths. For a moment, I wondered whether Adela also had a favorite stall for counting her money. That thought quickly turned to the specific denominations of notes she was counting. "Good tour?" I asked when she emerged from the bathroom. She nodded, grinned, and told me the exact amount she made. "Not bad for 8 people," she added. It wasn't pre-plague money, but it could put a dent in the damages that the horse secured in my apartment. "I'll be ready for Sunday," I said. "Under one condition." She took another French fry and raised her eyebrows. "I need a recommendation for someone who works with the supernatural." "Huh? For the tour?" "Yeah, I used to get questions about ghosts and stuff on the tour all the time. Occasionally people would ask where they could go for a seance or a ghost hunt, and I'd feel considerably more comfortable if I knew about a place in Prague where people can go to with supernatural problems. Some sort of an expert? In case someone on the tour asks." I didn't tell Adela about the horse in fear of her finding me too unstable for a job offer. Watching her face process my question about the supernatural, my stomach did a flip. I sounded unhinged. "I think my aunt knows a tarot card reader. I'm not sure if she speaks English though," Adela finally said. "I can get your number if you want though." "That sounds great," I said. "Good." She drained the rest of her beer as if she had a trapdoor hidden in her throat. Grabbing one last French fry, Adela rose from the table. "I'll chuck the number over to you when I get home, and I'll give you a ring tomorrow if you're down for a refresher on the tours. Good to see you again, Mark." She was halfway through the door when I had the thought. "Adela?" I asked. "Do you think the bartender will let me borrow a phone charger?" The Germans sitting behind me are getting progressively louder, and I don't think my stomach can handle the rest of my beer. A tarot card reader isn't exactly the type of help I was looking for, but beggars can't be choosers. Adela sent me over the number, and I'll try calling it tomorrow. Hopefully I'll find some answers there. Hopefully this step will take me closer to getting rid of the horse. Either way, I still have to contend with the horse tonight. The Tesco next to the subway might still be open. Maybe I can buy some apples there. Maybe I can last one more night without the horse in my bedroom being discovered. Even though the apartment was right above the smoky intersections of Ipe Pavlova, the room was completely silent. Climbing up the stairs, I could hear the screech of the 22 tram loud enough to wince. But the moment I entered the apartment, the universe went quiet. "Greetings, Mark. I have been expecting you." Not for a moment did I consider whether I mentioned my name on the phone. The mood was far too mystic for one to think about technology. "Dobrý den," I said, trying to make sense of her eyeshadow. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." She blinked with slow purpose. Bright emerald eyelids watched me from 2 circles of white that extended well past her eyebrows. It didn't feel like we were alone in the room. "So, do I just tell you about my problem? There's this horse." "No need," she said. "The cards will reveal all." And then, she led me to the table. A single candle flickered next to the deck of cards. The rest of the apartment was in complete darkness. Somehow, even though I was in the heart of a crowded city, I felt like I was sitting on the bottom of the ocean. "The thing is," I said, after she began shuffling the cards, "I think I'm cursed. Is there any way that you could help me with that? There's this horse that keeps on appearing." "Take a deep breath," she said, spreading out the stack of cards on the table. "Take a deep breath and pick 3 cards." Even though we were in the part of Prague that smells exclusively of smog and fried food, the air of the dark room felt like a forest meadow after a thunderstorm. I picked 3 cards from the collapse stack, unsure of how they would help me resolve my problem with the horse. "Is your heart satisfied with the cards you have picked?" she asked. I think so." Calling my heart satisfied would have been an overstatement. My present predicament with the horse had definitely progressed my blood pressure by a decade, but my pulse had no qualm with the 3 cards. She blinked, slower than before, as if she was letting her emerald eyes get a proper look at me. "Good," she said. "Now turn over the first card and let it speak." "Oh no!" The words left my mouth without permission. From the table, a grim reaper of charred bones stared back at me. He was angled towards the rising sun. He sat on a familiar horse. The words at the bottom of the card read, "Death." "Don't worry, dear Mark," she said, smiling. "The card of death doesn't mean that you will die. It simply means that there is a big change coming in your life. A change that might seem daunting and destructive, but it is a change that is not yours to resist. The card of death is a card of endings, but within every ending, there is an unavoidable rebirth." The glare of the refrigerator at 3 in the morning, the constantly rising infection charts, the sentimental scrolls through ancient TripAdvisor reviews. Sunday. That's when it would all end. The thought of tour guiding again made my stomach uneasy, but it made me calmer about the death card. "Should I, turn over the second card?" I asked. "What does your heart tell you?" she said, smiling. My heart spoke in a language I could not understand, but it didn't seem to have any disagreements with what was on the table. I flipped the second card. Her smile quickly faded away. A second death card. The Grim Reaper was no longer looking back at me. He was riding the familiar horse into the sunrise. In the dim candlelight, the bright card almost hurt my eyes. "Is, something wrong?" I asked, watching her tranquil face grow nervous by the second. Her blinks quickened, as if she was fighting for control with whatever was hidden behind her eyelids. "There's only one death card in the deck," she finally said. The candle matched the quiver in her voice. "So, how come there are 2 on the table?" Silence. Complete silence. "Flip over the 3rd card," my heart suggested. "Should I, flip over the final card?" "No." Her voice was colder than a sudden snowstorm. The candle on the table flickered as if it was caught in an angry draft. "No, you should." "Flip over the 3rd card," my heart demanded. Without thinking, I reached my hand out. Darkness. The room was plunged into complete darkness. Before the abyss fully set in, however, before the world went black, I saw it. A 3rd death card. The Grim Reaper was nothing but a faint outline in the blinding rays of a burning sun. All I could make out in the split second before the candle went out was the horse the skeleton rode on. It was the same familiar horse. We sat in the darkness for what felt like an eternity until I felt her touch my arm. Her grip was ethereal but firm. Without words, she led me to the door of the apartment. She did not ask for payment. She did not question me about the horse. She simply told me to never return. Soon enough, the screeches and shouts of Prague's downtown filled my ears once more. The chicken in my Texas Grandeur seemed undercooked, and the fries tasted like mashed potatoes, but at least the clerk let me use the phone charger. As soon as I had enough battery to turn on the phone, I did another frantic Google of cursed horse. All that came up were Red Dead Redemption 2 strategy guides and Pinterest blogs. I gave up. I decided I would just try to ignore the situation at home and enjoy the view from Ipe Pavlova's KFC.
"Isn't someone going to do something?"
Right outside of the window there was a makeshift tent. The crowds, the trams, the cars, all of the usual trappings of rush hour somehow existed next to the climate protest.
"Reprogram, rebel, reflect."
worrisome signs were hung from the edges of the tent, yet at its edge sat a ukulele circle of teens in tie-dye. Even though the trams were constantly spilling out crowds of busy-looking people, the protesters seemed to be in the depths of a heartfelt musical performance. Off to the side, trying to communicate the seriousness of climate change to the Russian commuters, were two other teens dressed in matching charity t-shirts.
How can we let this happen?
Some of the commuters took their flyers, but most just rushed on past. A woman who must have looked beautiful when color television was a novelty took umbrage with what the protesters had to say. One of the teens produced a bar chart filled with apocalyptic spikes. This did not solve the argument.
Extinction. It will happen to us. We must take responsibility.
Right beneath the text was a collection of skull pictures. One of them belonged to a human. One of them belonged to a horse. For a moment I wondered whether an animal was capable of comprehending climate change, whether we as a species were even capable of comprehending climate change. But then I found myself thinking about the horse again. It was early in the afternoon, but I knew what was waiting for me at home around midnight. The horse. I had gotten no closer to getting rid of it. I was tired and exhausted and alone in a world I couldn't comprehend. Sitting in that KFC, I felt like a man at the edge of a cliff. Della messaged me, asking if I wanted to have a drink and go over the tour path for Sunday. My stomach was coated in half a Texas Grander, and my mind was seized with incomprehensible worry. A drink and some company seemed like the most reasonable option. I let my phone charge past 50% and then I called an Uber. Adela still lived with her weird American roommate on the other side of town. With Prague traffic being Prague traffic, I figured I could squeeze in a nap through rush hour. By the time I made my way out of the KFC, the argument between the old lady and the teens had risen to enough fervor to gather a small audience. The protesters were too busy to offer me a flyer. I didn't mind. I just wanted to go somewhere quiet. The driver didn't ask my name, and I didn't introduce myself. I just memorized the first 3 letters of his license plate and got in the back of his beat-up Skoda. The inside of the car smelled of ancient cigarettes and stale beer. We moved half a meter before the car stopped. The driver got out. As if somewhere deep inside I knew what was about to happen, my eyes darted to my phone screen. A part of me must have registered the name when I ordered the Uber. A part of me must have known.
Open up. Don't be scared.
Yaroslav.
The moment I saw him, I locked the door. "I didn't steal your horse!" I yelled, but he refused to hear me.
Come out. Get out here.
He said, pulling on the handle.
Don't make me fucking angry.
With too much faith in my rhetoric skills, I unlocked the door. "I can explain," I said, knowing full well that I couldn't.
Don't be scared. Are you scared? Are you a fucking man?
He said, grabbing my collar with hands that smelled of cigarettes and rubbing alcohol.
What the fuck are you? You can't even fucking stand up. Are you a man? What the fuck are you?
I'm trying to get out of the car, but if you're in my way, look, I didn't steal your horse, but...
That's as far as I got, before the first punch. Before I could make sense of the hits, I was rolling in the mosaic of cigarette butts that decorate the walkways of Prague's downtown. My beatdown was deemed more interesting than the argument about CO2 levels in the atmosphere, yet no one intervened. There was still a handful of commuters that found me less interesting than their destination, but most of Ipe Pavlova had slowed down to watch. The teens with the ukulele stopped singing.
Isn't someone going to do something?
I yelled, in the few moments that Yaroslav's fist wasn't connected to my face. The question remained purely hypothetical. Everyone just watched. The other carriage drivers were right. Yaroslav was an angry man. He was angry and strong. With nothing but fast food in my stomach, I was far too weak to fight back. Each strike my nose received brought reality closer to the hush of static. I knew that if I didn't act, I would end up like the pigeon Yaroslav allegedly stomped to death.
Your horse is in my bedroom,
I yelled. His fist steadied. The anger burning behind his eyes gave way to disgust.
The fuck you doing to my horse?
Nothing. I want to help. I want to get the horse back to you. I'm sorry I ever questioned how well you take care of it. Please, just stop hitting me.
His fist was still clenched around my collar. But instead of hitting me again, Yaroslav started to force me into the car.
Get up. Get in the car. I know where you fucking live now.
I didn't correct him about Adela's address. I didn't argue. I just climbed into the car and hoped he wouldn't murder me. Yaroslav drove erratically, electing to stick to the tram lines rather than to the actual road. I wasn't sure if he was driving on cobblestone because he was trying to get away from the cops one of the bystanders might have called, or whether he was an erratic driver by nature. I didn't ask. I just sat in the back of the car, trying to not get any of my nosebleed on the seats.
Where the fuck is my horse?
He finally asked when no more traffic laws could be broken and we got stuck on a bridge gridlock.
Tell me what the fuck you did with my horse before I throw you into the fucking river.
I didn't do anything. I swear to God I didn't steal your horse. The night after we argued, it just appeared in my bedroom. It keeps on appearing in my bedroom. Every night, around midnight, it just stands in my room and then disappears when the morning comes. Please, believe me, I want it gone. I want to give the horse back to you. I just don't know how.
Yaroslav didn't respond. Instead, he drove on the sidewalk and cut towards the motorway. The moment he had a chance to speed up, he took it. We flew above the ancient streets of Prague at breakneck speed, wiping away centuries of history in seconds.
I'm so sorry,
I said, hoping that my penance would make Yaroslav less likely to end both of our lives in a fiery wreck. The engine roared as he slalomed around the other cars. With one hand on the wheel and his furious eyes everywhere but on the road, he lit up a cigarette.
Shouldn't have posed a fucking hypothetical to the universe.
The words left his mouth in a plume of thick smoke.
What do I do to get rid of the horse? How do I give it back to you? Please, I can't last another night with the animal in my tiny apartment. Please, just tell me what to do.
The air filled with scratchy silk strains. The world beyond the smoke started to fade.
Do I look like a fucking magical detective to you?
He hissed as we drove into a tunnel. The universe smoldered down to repeating flashes of orange from the outside world and the green light of the dashboard.
You brought this shit on yourself. I was the one who provoked the universe. You cooked this fucking porridge and now you gotta fucking choke on it. Don't ask me what to do, just fucking bring me back my horse.
The car came to an abrupt stop. Past the smoke, I could see the outlines of communist-era cement. How? I asked.
Are you fucking deaf? I don't know, just get it done. Or else.
A fist crashed into a palm in the cigarette-induced fog.
Now get the fuck out of my car and rate me 5 stars.
Adela screamed the moment she saw me in the hallway. I wasn't surprised. The reflection that stared back at me from the elevator was definitely scream-worthy. I felt, just as I looked, physically assaulted. What surprised me about Adela's response was how quickly she took control of the situation. Adela, unlike me, had attended one of the pseudo-mandatory first aid courses for tour guides. Within 2 minutes, I was lying on her couch with a cold compress on my forehead and frozen peas over my nose. She dug out a multitude of painkillers from her backpack, asked me if I'm allergic to any of them, and then asked me if I needed her to call the police. I was exhausted and bruised and hopeless. I didn't have the energy to lie or to be vague. As I told her about the horse, her face grew progressively more concerned. By the time I finished my story, she only had one comment. I think you've had a concussion, Mark. We should go to the hospital.
I swear this is all real. I might have a concussion, yeah, probably do, but the horse is real. That's why I asked you about supernatural help. That's why I went to the tarot card reader.
Her face softened. I couldn't tell whether she was starting to believe my story or whether she had simply decided to play along. How did that go? Did you find any answers with the tarot? I told her about my trip to Ipe Pavlova, about the 3 death cards and the fortune teller's reaction to my prediction. I told Adela how lost and afraid I was, and in response, her face softened further. Whether she believed my story was a mystery, but I could see she cared for my well-being. So, what's the plan now? She finally asked.
I don't know. I think the insane carriage driver is still waiting outside. I'd like to lay low for a bit, gather my thoughts, and then figure out what to do next. Would that be okay with you? At least half an hour until I'm sure Yaroslav is gone, then I'll get out of your hair.
Oh, stay as long as you like. The horse situation sounds, complicated. Happy to help however I can. Hope you don't mind if I have a drink, though. Long day. The cold compress stopped the throbbing aches in my face. Even though the frozen peas were completely covering my nose, it was no longer painful to breathe. I was thankful. So, how have you been, Adela? Better than you, I guess, she said, pouring herself a glass of wine. Just tired. Very tired. 6 hours of yelling a day really takes it out of you. Feel like a complete corpse. Looking forward to getting out of the city tomorrow, though. She took a sip, but then paused, realizing something. I'll still do the shift on Sunday, I said, before she had to ask. Horse or no horse, I need the money. I'm sure you'll do great. The people showing up these days are really nice, she said, filling up another glass. I'm also sure you'll find a way to get rid of that horse. Here's to hoping. The white wine didn't pair well with the blood in the back of my throat, but after a couple of gulps, I found my nerves loosening. A nice breeze from the outside made the world bearable without the cold compress. I looked around the apartment, looking for anything to talk about besides the horse. Where's, Sean? I asked. Adela's roommate had always been a good source of distraction. God knows. I think he went tripping to some psytrance festival. Poor guy went crazy, or more accurately, crazier during the lockdowns. She topped off her glass and took a healthy swig. Brought a frigging pigeon back home last April. Oh God, why? Said he was having nightmares and needed a new dream catcher. Apparently feathers from live animals have more energy. A dream catcher with Prague pigeon feathers doesn't sound very spiritual, or healthy for that matter. Those things carry all sorts of diseases. That's what I said. Adela's roommate had always been a good source of distraction. Soon enough, we were talking shit about our old parent company and rehashing old war stories. The bottle of wine quickly drained. By the time we were down in the corner store, I couldn't feel my face at all. I wasn't sure if it was the booze or the swelling, but I bought a new pack of frozen peas just to be sure. We also bought 2 bottles of wine. We drank them soon after. Before the plague, back when Adela and me were forced to attend meetings of our old parent company, we had a habit of getting absolutely plastered on the Vltava River. The meetings were always held on one of the tour boats, and there was plenty of free booze. No one ever questioned the free tour guides during the meetings, and enough of our colleagues took their responsibility seriously enough to cover for us, in case it was needed. As people droned on about hotel reservations and obscure chapel reconstructions below, Adela and me would get liquored up on the viewing deck while watching the city from the river. Her room was considerably less spacious than the top deck of SS Tourist Trap, but was a nice change from my cramped bedroom. As we drank, Adela pulled up 1-star reviews for our parent company's guided bus tours, and we went through our all-time favorites. In my drunkenness, things were starting to feel familiar. It was as if no time had passed since the last company meeting. The boat rides always took forever. A normal sightseeing tour of the Vltava takes about 2 hours, a time period which the owner of the company deemed insufficient for his monologues. So the boat would have to crawl its way through the riverside twice. 4 hours of comfort drinking always proved to be far too much for us. Each night would always end the same way. We would slump on plastic benches that were painted to look like wood as 1,000 years of history flowed by us. We would be deaf and dumb to the world, dragged down by both the booze and the exhaustion from whatever shift we had just finished. We would lean on each other and have the cognitive abilities of corpses, but we still knew where we were. We still knew what we were. We were happy little parasites. Happy little parasites that had somehow managed to attach themselves to something much bigger and weirder and eternal. Through repetition, the marvelous architecture had lost its charm. Through daily walks, the cobblestone felt more like an inconvenience. But with our minds diminished, and with the evening air in our hair, we knew exactly where we were.
Ježiš Maria!
She yelled. The sun had set, and the room had sizzled down to the dim lights of resting screens and active chargers. I could recognize the rough outlines of Adela's living room. I could also recognize something else. Oh God, Mark, is this? Yes.
When I got off the couch, a crippling hangover pulsed through my bones, but I bit past the nausea. There was a horse to soothe. His bulging eyes darted around the room in fear, but when I touched him, the animal calmed. Shh, horse. It's okay. It's okay. I'm here. A lamp by the side of the couch lit up. This panicked the horse somewhat, but the animal was considerably calmer than the night I left it alone in the apartment. Sorry, Adela said. It's just, wow. There's a horse in my apartment. The horse said, as if it was also voicing its confusion. Do you have any apples? I asked. The horse really likes apples. I was left alone with the horse while Adela went to search the fridge. The animal's big dumb eyes looked at me for answers, as they always had, but something felt different. The horse knew. The horse knew that after nearly a week of unchecked chaos, there was a sliver of hope. We were not in my cramped bedroom anymore. The logic of this mind-boggling equestrian curse was starting to reveal itself. Sean keeps these apple slices in his rolling tobacco to keep stuff fresh, Adela said, producing an apple fit for a barnyard animal. I also brought a trash bag. What for? She spread out the black plastic near the horse's tail. The animal didn't mind. It was too busy chomping on the apple and taking in its new, spacious surroundings. If the horse is gonna be here till sunrise, I don't want to risk it shitting on the floor. Wouldn't want my room to smell of manure for the rest of eternity. Oh yeah, I said, realizing that I'm an idiot. Trash bag. That's smart. I did that too. The night outside was calm. With the exception of a particularly anxious dog barking outside, nothing stirred. In silence, we stared at the animal, and the animal stared back at us. So, you must be kind of relieved, right? She said, not taking her eyes off the horse. I nodded. The horse sighed. My bedroom was far too cramped for an animal to move, but the spacious floor plan of Adela's living room provided plenty of comfort. The horse stepped from hoof to hoof, and then, with what almost seemed like a purr of approval, the animal laid down. So, tomorrow night, you'll just sleep somewhere near the angry carriage driver dude, and you'll be, not cursed anymore? I would hope so. Cool. Weird, and horrifying, and definitely disconcerting vis-a-vis the laws of the universe, but cool. Bet you're a bit less nervous about Sunday now, eh? I had made a leap in figuring out the nature of my equestrian curse, and I felt the joy of it, but everything past that was wine-filled regret. I feel like shit, I said, tasting the rot of a hangover in my mouth. Happy about the horse thing, but I still feel like shit. I'll go check if there's any Gatorade in the house. I wasn't sure if finding out that the horse appears in the place where I last slept would help. With a bit of luck, I could pass out on the benches outside of my apartment and then call the cops. Surely they would find someone to take care of the horse. I was uncertain whether the horse wouldn't just reappear in my bedroom the following night, but I refused to hold on to those doubts. Sitting there on the couch, watching a barnyard animal try to get comfortable on the 5th floor of a Soviet-era apartment, I knew I needed a win. Oh hey, Mark. A familiar voice sounded off from the door. Even though it was well past midnight, Sean still had his sunglasses on. Poorly stitched patches of cartoon eyeballs hung from his jean jacket. The only thing that had changed about the eccentric since the plague was his facial hair. Whoa, would hate to see how the other guy looks like. Is he in the hospital? No. Still roaming the streets of Prague in his Uber. The horse didn't react strongly to Sean's entrance. Sean himself seemed almost disinterested in the animal. The guy just leant up against the doorframe and watched the horse in his living room as if it had been a part of a completely regular occurrence. After a couple seconds, however, his curiosity got the better of him. That's, your horse, Mark? Kind of. I gave Sean a concise version of my horse predicament. His face lacked any skepticism as I told him my story, but he offered considerably less advice than Adela did. All that Sean managed to say in response to my tale of cosmic confusion was, "Huh, that's Prague for you, I guess." Adela returned with a single bottle of Gatorade that we rationed between each other. After a couple of minutes, she was feeling considerably less hungover. Even poured herself a glass of wine. Yet my body was still a wreck. I wasn't sure whether it was the booze or the nerves, but something at my core was slowly starting to suggest I should go vomit. "This should help," Sean said, fishing a flask out of his jacket. It shined of silver and had a 6-legged horse emblazoned on its side. "What's in it?" I asked. "Hair of the dog. It'll make your hangovers go away," he replied. I didn't want to vomit outside the comfort of my own house, and I was far too exhausted to question the contents of the flask further. I just took a big swig and hoped for the best. In an instant, my throat lit up with a cleansing pain. The drink sunk its claws into the depths of my stomach, but it cleared out the phlegm from my throat. "Jesus, Sean, what the hell is this?" "Something Slovakian," he said. "Strong stuff, but good stuff. Don't drink too much of it, though. You'll go blind." I capped the flask and tried to pass it back to Sean, but he shook his head. "No," he said. "One doesn't just pose a hypothetical to the universe and carries on. You still have a journey ahead of you. You'll need the liquid help. Consider it an early or late birthday gift. It's been a while." "It has," Adela said, refilling her glass. "Where you been tonight anyway, Sean?" As the three of us sat on the couch, Sean entertained us with a story from a psytrance festival held in an old abandoned factory. Adela kept on filling her glass, our raconteurs smoked a handful of solitary joints, and I just kept on watching the horse laying in the middle of the room. The animal had been calmer than it had ever been, but his eyes were still filled with a nebulous sadness. With Adela's permission, I pulled up some royalty-free footage of wild horses on the television. As Sean told his elaborate drug stories, the horse watched the screen with fascination. I was happy to bring the animal some form of distraction, but the longer I watched those huge eyes gaze at drone footage of freedom, the more I realized I was showing the horse something that it would never have. There were no quiet meadows to run through in the city of Prague, and Yaroslav would never allow the animal to move at any speed faster than a tourist-friendly trot. I felt bad about myself, but I found distraction in Sean's stories. By the time the stories became too complicated to follow, my hungover and beaten body found rest on the couch. When I woke, all that was left of the horse was just excrement on a plastic bag. Sean had left for his room, and Adela was far too deep in intoxicated hibernation to wake up. I gathered up the horse's mess and tiptoed my way out of the apartment. Adela lived in the housing projects on the edge of town, and so did I, but we lived on opposite sides of Prague. Jumping between buses and metros to make my way home seemed like far too difficult a task for my diminished state, so once I disposed of the trash bag, I called an Uber. The moment I saw the driver's name, I cancelled my ride. I tried hailing a Bolt, but the same name popped up once again. Yaroslav. Meeting the angry carriage driver was a part of the plan I had hatched up on Adela's couch, but I had no interest in sharing another car ride with the maniac. If he wanted his horse back, he would have to meet me outside of the police station, or wherever authorities store mysterious horses. I was not going to let the man beat the shit out of me again without the police being present. I swept my way through a couple more obscure ride-sharing apps, and they all returned back the same name. I had consigned myself to the slow crawl of public transportation, yet just as I was about to shuffle my way to the nearest metro station, a familiar beat-up Skoda pulled up next to me.
"I should crack your face for cancelling all those fucking rides,"
Yaroslav hissed from an open smoky window.
"But all I want from you now is for you to explain to me exactly how I'm going to get reacquainted with my stolen property. Get in the car."
"I have a plan. I just need some time. Let me take the subway back home and I will call you."
That wasn't a fucking request. Get in the car.
The girl sitting across the aisle has a plush doll of a horse on her lap. The toy doesn't capture the animal's gargantuan size or its horrible teeth, but its eyes. Its eyes are perfect. Somehow, with nothing but 2 brown marbles and some white paint, the toy maker accomplished the impossible. That fear, that innocence, that expression of utter helplessness that I have seen each and every night. It gazes back at me from across the aisle. The moment the girl notices me staring at her plush horse, she recoils. She says something to her mother. The woman scowls at me, grabs her child, and moves on to another carriage. The face mask covers my disfigured nose, but does nothing for my black eyes. I look like a corpse. I take another swig from the flask so I don't feel like one. Outside, the world is condensed into teardrops. Sharp strikes of lightning momentarily light up the silhouettes of an ancient Gothic city, but most of the train surroundings are fog strained through rain, with the occasional flash of headlights. Adela gave me an umbrella for tomorrow's shift, so I take some comfort in my forethoughts to bring it along. That comfort drains the moment I realize how close my re-entry to the tour guiding world is. My stomach does a full flip when I realize what I have to do before I put on my name badge. I took my old backpack, the same ratty bag I carried around for 5 years of summer rushes. It doesn't hold hundreds of flyers and maps anymore, though. Inside, there are only apples. My umbrella peeks out like a flag from one of the side pouches. A rusty crowbar sticks out of the other side of the bag. I'm on a train heading out of Prague. To bring the horse back to its legal owner. If you wouldn't have ambushed me outside of Adela's apartment, things would have been different. If I could have somehow avoided a collision with Yaroslav, I would have just fallen asleep on the benches below my apartment. The horse would end up with the police, and Yaroslav would have to retrieve it from them. The animal would no longer be my problem, and Yaroslav's cruelty towards the horse would no longer be on my conscience. Yet, when I stumbled out of Adela's apartment in the early afternoon, the angry carriage driver was there. Yaroslav had a plan of his own that he wanted me to follow. I wasn't given a choice in the matter. I'm only riding the train for a handful of stops out of the city, but the moment we leave the last station with Praha in its name, all traces of urbanization disappear. Fields that stretch out into eternity spread out beyond the wet plexiglass. The occasional flashes of lit windows through the fog look like dying fireflies, but I remind myself that there are people inside of those homes. People tend to be kind, I remind myself. I try to convince myself that most of those kind people would contact animal welfare if they thought their neighbor was abusing his horse. Under physical duress, I revealed to Yaroslav what I had learned of my equestrian curse. The horse would appear wherever I had last slept. The problem of returning the animal was simply a question of choosing the right sleeping spot. He found no joy in being closer to reuniting with his stolen property. He only found more anger. Banging his steering wheel, Yaroslav insisted that I bring the horse to his house outside of Prague. The animal was always kept in Yaroslav's backyard like a village dog. There was no stable for me to sleep in. The idea of taking a nap in Yaroslav's home was out of the question as well. It was my responsibility to bring the horse back to him, and he wanted nothing to do with the logistics of the operation. When I insisted that I couldn't just sleep on the road, when I told him that the only way I could bring him back the horse was with a suitable resting place, he got out of the car. For a moment, I feared that he would assault me again, but instead, he reached deep into the trunk of his beat-up Skoda and produced a crowbar.
Here, you fucking moron. There's some abandoned stables near town. Hopefully that will make for a nice sleeping spot for your highness. If it doesn't...
Yaroslav slammed the rusted metal stick against his palm.
If it doesn't, I don't give a fuck. If I don't have my horse back by morning, I'll figure out a way to vent my displeasure.
The metal was thick enough to break bone. I didn't argue. I took his crowbar, jotted down his number, and told myself the horse would be safer in his backyard than in my cramped bedroom. The only modern thing about the town where Yaroslav lives is the smart ticket machine at the train station. Everything else that lies behind a curtain of rain looks like it hasn't been touched for 100 years. The 6 or so people that exit the train with me crowd what little shelter the station provides. Almost in unison, they all light up cigarettes. For a moment, I consider waiting in a cloud of tar, but I've seen the forecast. The rain isn't going to stop. The gray sky is slowly growing black, and I don't have time to spare. At first the streets are wet but walkable, yet soon enough I am led off the pedestrian path. The walk towards the old stable I spotted on Google Maps takes me out of town and down a road that thoroughly soaks my feet. With no buildings to shield me from the wind, my umbrella flails around like a wild beast longing to escape. I tame it. I tame my umbrella and I grit my teeth and I keep on walking. For what feels like a lifetime, there's nothing but fields and fog. Yet just as I start losing hope in my direction, I see it. Cement in the middle of a field. A high fence of steel. My one and only landmark. The Messianic Psychiatric Institute. The morning after I had first discovered a horse in my apartment, I read up on the place. A psychiatric evaluation seemed like a reasonable course of action after finding a horse in my bedroom. Figured that a bit of research would at least distract me from the hoof marks in my floor. The recent name change from the Messianic Insane Asylum made me somewhat uneasy, but their official website seemed welcoming enough. I browsed through the services they offered and I almost called their helpline. Almost.
As of 2011, the Messianic Psychiatric Institute is proud to offer hippotherapy to both children and adults. The horses and handlers are fully trained to handle your therapeutic needs. Consultation is necessary.
The picture beneath the announcement made me nauseous. The horse on the photograph looked terrifyingly familiar. I passed by the hospital and started making my way up a drenched mud path. I do my best not to think about the animal, yet every drop of rain that hits my umbrella makes me feel guilty. I can imagine the horse standing in some unkempt backyard, drenched and miserable and missing the shelter of a communist-era housing block. A rush of shame travels down my body. I search for distraction to my guilt, and I soon find it. Hail. For a mere second, I imagine a horse standing in a backyard and being pelted by shards of ice, but my attention soon turns to the umbrella. The logo of the company that will hopefully provide my rent money hovers above me. Fearing tearing a hole in my livelihood, I run. The world in front of me is difficult to make out through my umbrella shield, but the clattering of hail on a tin roof guides my sprint. I find refuge behind the waterfall of a rain gutter. The crowbar feels heavy in my hands, and I feel ill breaking the law, but I remind myself I have no choice. The tool makes quick work of the barn's door. There are holes in the ceiling, and the floor is soaked, but I am safe from the hail. Even though the barn provides shelter from the elements, I am certain I am its first visitor in a long time. Rusted tools still sit on the shelves, and there is worn riding gear hanging from one of the posts. If this was a common sleeping spot, there would be nothing of value left. The sun, hidden behind the storm, starts to grow dim. I check my phone. It's only 7:30, and I have most of my battery charge left, but I don't want to risk anything. I lay down on a pile of ancient hay in one of the horse pens. I close my eyes. I try to sleep. Yet sleep refuses to come. The soft side of my backpack provides for a comfortable enough pillow, but tiny bits of straw keep on scratching against my face. For a moment I consider sleeping in the mud, but then I remember the tour group I'll have to lead once I bring the horse back to Yaroslav. I also realize it's not the straw that is keeping me awake. There's a whole new life waiting for me a sunrise away. I know that as soon as I lead the horse back to Yaroslav, I'll be free. Yet thoughts of the horse's future cloud those of my own. I fear the life the animal will have to live with Yaroslav. The flask in my back pocket proves handy. 2 sips of Sean's mysterious liquor, and the possibility of sleep feels much more palatable. The drink sends a rush of warmth through my rain-soaked body, and that warmth soon turns to numbness. I feel my body drifting off. Yet the thoughts about the horse don't stop. My internal monologue still keeps tearing away at me for abandoning the animal, but now my conscience is drunk. The words that chastise me in my soul become more pointed and slurred. I start to worry I won't fall asleep. The idea of the horse appearing in Adela's apartment again quickens my pulse enough to open my eyes. I check my phone. The battery is still charged past the halfway mark. All I need in the morning is enough juice to call Yaroslav. With a couple scrolls through Spotify, I find a bland-looking podcast about the Holy Roman Empire. I put my earphones in. The torrents of complex explanations of power structures immediately soothes my consciousness. The words of the podcast soon lose meaning and turn into psychic noise. My mind drifts, unable to focus on anything but the tenor of the amateur historian's voice.
I dream I am Rudolph II of the House of Habsburg. My body is malformed with syphilis and ulcers, my mind sick with voices gathered through generations of intermarriage. Yet I hold power. I am Archduke of Austria, King of Bohemia, Holy Roman Emperor. My court is filled with astronomers and artists and alchemists. They came from all across the empire to help me achieve my destiny. They came to turn lead into gold, to brew the water of eternal youth, to help me defeat God so that I may serve as my own master. Yet they have all failed. The halls of my castle are filled with eternal arts, with priceless minerals, with skins of animals that no longer roam the earth. Yet I spend most of my time at the royal stables. Beyond the gates a revolt festers. Even within the walls of the castle, plots are whispered. I know my life is at an end. I know that I will not have much time to enjoy the brilliant minds I have surrounded myself with, to feast and drink and indulge in the riches I have gathered. Yet I spend most of my time at the royal stables. I sit with the horses. I sit with the horses, and in their eyes I find solace. They understand me. I sit with the horses because they are the only ones that understand me.
The animal is in the pen with me. Through blind instinct, I roll beneath the horse, narrowly dodging one of his stomping hooves. The rush of adrenaline guides my drowsy body out of the pen and onto the muddy floor of the stable. Shh, horse. It's okay. It's okay. I'm here. I pat the horse's muscular jaw. Shh. It's all right. Look, there's space. Come, let me show you. I gently tug on the horse's mane and lead it out of the pen. A flash of lightning brightens up the stable for a split second. The horse's eyes bulge and shiver in shock. A wave of dark thunder spreads throughout the stable, causing the animal to slip from my grasp. The whole stable shakes. Beneath the echo of the thunderclap, I can hear the horse galloping. At first I fear that the horse has gone mad, that it will trample me if I get in its way. Yet as more strikes of lightning illuminate the creature, I see that it is not frenzied, it is not panicked. As the flashes from the sky seep into the stable, I see the horses celebrating. As if painted through the muzzles of invisible paparazzi, I see the horse leap across the stable. It kicks and neighs and stomps. It jumps and runs and stretches across the muddy ground. The portraits the flashes of lightning illuminate are not those of a horse enslaved or cursed. They are still-life paintings of the utter ecstasy of freedom. The storm rages and the horse celebrates, yet as the rain starts to die down, as the dark clouds part away from the moon, the animal calms. The horse walks towards me. It presses its giant head against my forehead. I know. I'm happy too. I reach into my backpack and produce an apple. The horse's touch doesn't leave my forehead. The animal simply angles its skull to eat. I can feel its massive jaw crush the fruit. It saddens me that the horse's magnificent power will be used to pull naive tourists through city traffic. The horse happily sighs when it finishes off the apple. The thought of the animal having to make sense of a traffic light makes me sick to my stomach, but I swallow my nausea. Okay, horse, I say. The storm is dying down. It's time I took you back to Yaroslav. The animal's temperament changes in an instant. The horse screams, retreating to one of the empty pens. From across the stable, he stares at me in fear. Please, horse, I say, reaching out for its mane once again. I can't live like this anymore. I'm sorry, but I can't take care of you. I know Yaroslav isn't a good owner, but I can't do this anymore. I need to be free. I need to make a living. I need to work. The horse doesn't bare its teeth at me, but it refuses to step out of the pen. The animal simply watches me with its sad, glassy eyes. I quickly check my phone screen, down to 14% battery. I take the risk and open up Google. I grab the bridle from the stable's post and watch the colorful diagrams on my screen. The horse doesn't resist as I pull the equipment across its ears, but it doesn't help me either. The animal just stares at me, as if baffled by my betrayal. Come on, horse, please, don't be angry. The horse isn't angry, just disappointed.
It doesn't resist, but each step that it takes requires an immense amount of force from my side. With my body filled with nothing but fast food, apples, and liquor, I am unable to properly lead the horse. By the time I get the stable doors open, I am utterly exhausted.
Please, horse, I say. You need to understand, I can't help you. I can't take care of you anymore.
I offer the animal an apple, but it refuses. Beyond the stable doors, there is a world of moonlit meadows and forests, but the horse refuses to look anywhere other than my face. The flask that Sean gave me is empty. There's nothing in it to dull my guilt. I manage one last pull on the reins before I give up.
If I had a horse, I would treat him much nicer,
The dark woods whisper, reminding me of my lies. I'm sorry, horse, I say, sitting down in the mud. I'm sorry that I even tried. The horse doesn't look away from me. It stares into my soul in a desperate attempt to communicate. Looking at those fist-sized eyes, I cannot help but to realize I am not the creature that is truly cursed. I am not the one who has spent years sleeping outside, unsheltered from the elements. I am not the one who was forced into straps of leather in a world I could never possibly comprehend. I am not the one that is Yaroslav's workhorse. We sit there for a long time, trying to understand each other, trying to comprehend the predicament that we have been placed into. Outside, the darkness starts to grow dim. A sunrise is imminent. Another night haunted by the horse I cannot explain is almost certain. I cannot bring myself to pull the horse out of the stable. I make peace with the idea of another physical assault by the angry carriage driver, yet the hopelessness in my mind parts for a gesture of goodwill. Horse? I say, looking up at the giant animal. Would you like to go outside? You're not going back to Yaroslav. I just want to take you outside. I just want to take you outside so you can run like the wild horses from the video I showed you. The animal's ears twitch. For the first time since midnight, it looks away from my eyes and studies the dim nature beyond. It says, taking a step past the puddles the rain gutters created overnight. I let go of its reins. It says, trotting out into the overgrown field. For a moment, the horse simply bites away at strands of grass, but soon enough it turns back to me. It snorts, bending down to my height. Bits of green still hang from its lips. It watches me expectantly. You want me to get on? The horse bends even lower. But I don't know how to ride a horse. I don't argue with the animal. I put on my backpack, securing both the umbrella and the crowbar, and climb onto the horse. The horse is still as I try to make myself comfortable on its back, yet before I can ask if I'm sitting the right way, we're off. The animal runs like mad through the meadow. My legs shiver with effort to stay attached to the beast. My muscles burn with pain and fear, yet whenever it feels like I'm about to fall off, the animal slows. The horse leads me up a hill to the edges of the forest. I fear that the animal will lead me through a land of tree branches and uneven stones, but just as the ride is about to get dangerous, the horse stops. It says, looking away from the forest. I follow the animal's big majestic eyes and am left speechless. Out in the distance, past the dark woods and endless fields, I see light. Reaching out into the dying darkness, the mother of all cities shines like a bright torch. More than 1,000 years ago, men stronger than me, hungrier than me, more resolved than me, had fevered dreams of a golden city. Past the arable land and the waterways, they saw something more. They saw a bastion of civilization that would turn into the beating hearts of an empire. Through sweat and blood and centuries, they built a wonder that pilgrims from across the ocean would come to witness. Sitting on the back of that mysterious horse, I know that regardless of what happens, soon I will be standing in the center of that Gothic jewel, trying to explain the magic and the centuries of absurdity it took to build. A 3-hour tour could never do it justice, but to those that don't have the time, to those that couldn't walk through the cobbled streets for years, it would have to do. In a couple of hours, I know I will be doing a job I am well proficient at. Thank you, horse, I whisper. I'm sorry I ever tried bringing you back to Yaroslav. The animal shouts victoriously, rearing in excitement. The moment its hooves hit the ground, we set off once more.
The horse runs through the edges of the meadow, scarcely giving me opportunity to keep my bag in check. The rays of the rising sun make my sleep-deprived eyes squint, but beyond the impending ball of fire, I can see chunks of concrete rise out of the fog. The Messieric Psychiatric Institute. The animal circles the high iron railing of the hospital, as if searching for something. All the blinders on the institution are pulled, but I keep on looking around, waiting for someone of authority to witness the horse and chastise me for my riding. Yet no such obstruction presents itself. Instead, the horse brings me to a spot where the iron rails of the psychiatric hospital fall away and are replaced with low wooden fencing. Outside of the Messieric Psychiatric Institute stables, there are 7 horses, eating grass in the morning dew. The horse snorts, lowering the front of its body once more. "Do you think this will work?" I ask. The horse's eyes are dumb, but full of hope. After making sure the crowbar and the umbrella are still in my bag, I climb off the horse's back. The animal's eyes jump between me and the group of its kin. It looks at me expectantly, slowly shaking its head. "Do you want me to take off the reins?" The horse holds still. I remove the riding equipment from its head. The animal says, catching the attention of the horses across the fence. They watch us, curious about what we are doing, but the horse is blind to them. For a moment, the animal is blind to everything but me. He presses his long forehead against mine. He says, "I feel like I should say goodbye, but I don't have the chance to." Just as I open my mouth, the horse turns, runs towards the institute, and leaps over the fence. The other horses come over to smell the intruder, but soon enough they go back to eating grass. The horse looks back at me, its big eyes filled with gratitude. Then, it joins other horses in their grassy breakfast. I know I should leave. I know Yaroslav will call me soon and demand to know the location of the horse. The path towards the railway station isn't long, but the road is empty enough for me to get run over by his beat-up Skoda. I know I should leave, but I don't. Instead, I make my way towards the tree line and watch the stables from a distance. I want to make sure the horse doesn't disappear. Once the sun crawls into the sky, a woman dressed in baby blue psychiatric garb and riding boots walks out onto the field. She gives the horse a quick glance as she makes her way towards the stables, but then she stops. She stares at the horses, confused. She counts them with her fingers. She counts them twice.
"Well, hello there,"
she says, approaching the horse far too familiar to me.
"What brings you here?"
She examines the horse. He lets her. For a couple seconds, she inspects the horse with confusion, but then she shrugs.
"Welcome aboard, I guess,"
she says. The sun is high in the air. If the horse was to disappear, it would have disappeared already. "Goodbye, horse," I whisper. My phone rings. Knowing how little battery I have left, I pick it up immediately. "I'm not bringing the horse back to you. You're a cruel man, and you don't deserve this gentle animal. If you want him, you'll have to find him. I don't care if—"
"Mark?"
The voice is considerably softer than I expected. It takes my brain a couple seconds to realize I'm not speaking to Yaroslav.
"Are you okay, Mark?"
Adela asks.
"How did it go with the horse?"
I tell her as much about the situation as I can understand, which is not much. She listens.
"But you think it's over?"
Adela asks when I finish with my confusing tale. "I think so," I say.
"So that's good. With the horse being gone, you'll be able to..."
I hear a train in the back of the phone call. I realize why Adela is calling me. "Yeah, I'm ready for the shift. Might even make it home for a quick shower," I say, getting up off the forest floor. "Worst case scenario, I have the umbrella with me."
"Nervous?"
she asks. I search my stomach. I find nothing but mild hunger. I think I'll be fine," I reply. A draining battery alert rushes the phone call to an end. My backpack feels lighter. I feel healthier. I am less like a charred skeleton marching towards an exhausted death and more like a regular person experiencing the gentlest of hangovers. With only 5% battery left, I decide to rip off the final band-aid of conflict. I look for Yaroslav's number. Yet, I don't find it. I scroll through my recently added contacts, my Uber rides, my email receipts, yet all evidence of Yaroslav has disappeared. Even a crowbar which the angry carriage driver lent me is gone. Beyond the wooden fence, the horse runs around with its new brothers and sisters, and watching him, I can't help to wonder which one of us was truly cursed. Goodbye, horse, I whisper again, and start making my way towards the train station. The train heading to Prague is far too crowded for me to get a seat, so I'm forced to rest my tired feet by the bike racks. Every couple of minutes I have to shift around to let people through to the bathroom, but after the suffering the past week has brought into my life, I don't really mind. I'm just happy that I'll probably manage a shower before I get to work. I'm just happy that the horse is somewhere safe. I'm just happy that it's all over. The music comes in strained through the aging speakers, but after announcement of the first Prague railway station, I hear it. A gentle chirp of a melody destined to grow into something powerful, something eternal. As Smetana's Vltava crackles through the train speakers, I can't help but to think about the first tribes that settled the riverbank. They set their roots down with the intent to survive, not knowing that they would do so much more. I think of the castles, the bridges, the theaters. I think of the dukes and kings and emperors, of floods and fires and war. I think of the plagues. The train pulls into Prague's main railway station, and I get out. Beyond me, there is a city that has stood the test of time for over 1,000 years. A city that stands as a living testament to man's ability to survive and rebuild and prosper. A city that reaches towards the sky with 100 dark stone spires. Excitement at the privilege to share the story of Prague festers in my stomach.